10 days before nurses are set to go on strike again, the Prime Minister suggests there might be a deal to be done. Health union leaders will sit down in Downing Street tomorrow, hopeful of a pay rise this year, they say, after this remark from Mr Sunak.
The government has always been clear that it's happy to talk about pay that is responsible, that's affordable for the country. That's always been clear.
So tonight, the official promotion of Prince Harry's tell-all memoir is about to begin with a series of primetime TV interviews and another very difficult few days for the royal family. China reopens its borders to international visitors for the first time in nearly 3 years. And all set for launch, the first rocket to leave UK soil, bound for space.
This is ITV News with Geraint, Vincent.
Good evening. The boss of one of the unions representing NHS nurses says she feels a chink of optimism after the Prime Minister suggested the government would be willing to discuss pay. Health unions are set to hold talks with the government tomorrow, but the head of the Royal College of Nursing is warning that strike action set for later this month will go ahead if there's no compromise on this year's pay deal. Here's our political reporter, Amy Lewis.
Save our NHS! They made history when they went on strike last month. Now nurses are counting down to their next walkout. The unions and the government have just 10 days to resolve their dispute over pay and working conditions. Earlier, the Prime Minister appeared to signal there is some room for manoeuvre.
The government has always been clear that it's happy to talk about pay that is responsible, that's affordable for the country. That's always been clear. But we have to look now. We're about to start a new pay settlement round for this year.
NHS staff in England and Wales, including nurses, were given an average pay rise of almost 5% this year, but are now demanding for the increase to match inflation, which is currently more than 10%. Tomorrow, the Health Secretary Steve Barclay and the unions will meet to discuss pay for the next financial year, starting this April. But the leader of the nurses' union told me they will only call off the strikes if this year's current pay is increased.
Would I want those strikes to go ahead on the 18th and 19th of January? No, absolutely not. But they will go ahead. They will go ahead, and those nurses will continue to stand on picket lines, losing a day's pay if their voice is not being heard on behalf of their patients.
Louise is a senior nurse with a nursing degree and 7 years' experience. She earns £32,000 a year and says she will strike if that doesn't increase immediately.
I love looking after my patients, but when you're coming home and you're worrying about whether, you've got enough money to keep the heating on, to get your food for work, the stress levels are massive.
We have been undervalued.
They would, they say, rather be with patients than on picket lines. But if their pay doesn't increase this week, they will go on strike in 10 days.
Well, the Prime Minister was asked once again today if he uses an NHS GP, and once again he refused to answer the question. Now, he wouldn't be the first Prime Minister to use private healthcare. Margaret Thatcher did, but why does it matter? Well, critics say for two reasons. Firstly, because many patients can't access healthcare at the moment because of the long waiting lists on the NHS, and secondly, because they certainly cannot afford to go private. Now, of course, Mr Sunak is an incredibly wealthy man, leading for some to say that he is appearing to be out of touch.
OK, Amy Lewis in Downing Street, many thanks. Now, after all the anticipation and those leaks from his autobiography, tonight we finally hear officially from Prince Harry. In the final excerpts from an interview to be broadcast on ITV tonight, he talks of how he felt unable to show any emotion after the death of his mother, as Martha Fairley reports.
King Charles was all smiles in public, chatting to well-wishers as he attended church at Castle Riding in Norfolk. Whatever his private thoughts are on the matter, he seemed in good spirits after a week in which his son, Prince Harry, has launched a catalogue of allegations about the royal family.
Everyone knows where they were and what they were doing the night my mother died.
The first of several interviews Harry's filmed to promote his book Spare is broadcast tonight.
I cried once at the burial. And, you know, I go into detail about how strange it was and how actually there was some guilt that I felt, and I think William felt as well, by walking around the outside of Kensington Palace. You know, 50,000 bouquets of flowers to our mother, and there we were shaking people's hands, smiling. I've seen the videos, right? I look back over it all, and the wet hands that we were shaking, we couldn't understand why their hands were wet, but it was all the tears that they were wiping away.
At the time of Diana's death, the Queen was criticised for remaining at Balmoral with her grandsons, while in London there was an outpouring of grief. Ultimately, Harry and William were thrust into the spotlight while mourning their mother.
The decision was taken to walk behind their mother's coffin, to be visible in grief. And I think that context of the clamouring for the public for a visible manifestation, a visible sign of the royal family's grief, was what led to that image of Harry and the reality for Harry of walking behind his mother's coffin.
Everyone thought and felt like they knew our mum. And the two closest people to her, the two most loved people by her, were unable to show any emotion in that moment.
Harry was just 12 when his mother died. 25 years later, we're hearing how it felt for him to be in the public eye while dealing with such a traumatic loss. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
Well, let's speak to our US correspondent, Dan Rivers, who is in California, where Harry and Meghan now live, of course. Dan, lots of anticipation here. What about where you are?
Yeah, look, I think everyone in their hometown here in Montecito is perfectly aware of the launch of this book and the blaze of publicity surrounding it. I think most Americans broadly would be supportive of their right to speak out, even if they may not particularly agree with what they say. Of course, everyone knows the book's coming out on Tuesday. The ITV interview tonight, of course, will be fascinating for many people to hear the Prince in his own words. We've heard some of the excerpts there, but to hear some more detail on that. Of course, most Americans won't be able to watch ITV here, but they will have plenty of opportunity to hear the Prince on other channels. He's doing 60 Minutes on CBS with Anderson Cooper Sunday night tonight in the US, and then he's on Good Morning America on ABC tomorrow morning, and then he's on The Late Show on Tuesday, and of course Tuesday is the day the book comes out. So plenty of opportunity, media saturation you could say this week, with many Americans I think broadly interested to hear precisely what Harry has to say and how he comes across.
OK, Dan in California, many thanks. And Harry, the interview is on ITV1, STV and ITVX from 9 o'clock tonight. Ukraine has dismissed as propaganda Russian claims to have killed 600 Ukrainian troops in a missile attack. Russia says the strike on the city of Kramatorsk was in retaliation after a Ukrainian missile attack on a Russian barracks last week. And a teacher in the United States who was shot by a 6-year-old pupil is showing signs of improvement, the authorities say. Abby Zwerner has suffered life-threatening injuries after the incident in Virginia on Friday, which police have said was not an accident. Now, for the first time in nearly 3 years, international visitors have been allowed to travel to China. The border has been reopened and new arrivals will not need to quarantine. Our Asia correspondent Debbie Edward was among the first to arrive in China under the new rules.
The international terminal in Beijing became a scene of joyful reunions again on Sunday. Loved ones who haven't seen each other in years and couples who had missed that special airport embrace were able to meet as China dropped its quarantine requirements for international arrivals. Xiao and Li were among the first to be reunited.
I am very happy. It means we could be together sooner. This policy means our country and people's lives can get back to normal.
Even Hong Kong has been closed off from the mainland, but this morning the railway shutters were lifted and the crowds packed onto the first train to run between the two sides in almost 3 years. Passengers arriving from abroad have had to endure up to 3 weeks of centralised isolation. Latterly, it was reduced to 10, but it still deterred most from travelling. I was on one of the first flights in from Hong Kong.
The only difference between this experience and pre-pandemic was the PCR test I had to do before departure and a health declaration form you have to fill out. But now it even seems possible that those measures will also be phased out in the coming months. And I'm sure we will soon start to take it for granted, but for now at least, it is a great relief not to be facing any quarantine.
The reopening of the world's most populated country should help the global economy. But with Chinese New Year just 2 weeks away and millions on the move amid a continuing COVID outbreak, it poses another challenge to our public health. Debbie Edward, ITV News, Beijing.
Football now, and a shock in the FA Cup this evening. Premier League Aston Villa have been knocked out by League Two Stevenage. Villa were leading until the final few minutes when Stevenage equalised from the penalty spot. Then in a dramatic finish, the team from 3 divisions below the Premier League shocked the Villa Park crowd with a winning goal from Dean Campbell. And earlier on, another Premier League club came within a whisker of being knocked out. Leeds United needed a stoppage-time equaliser to force a replay in a dramatic tie against Championship club Cardiff City. Chris Scudder was watching.
On a weekend of cup shocks, Cardiff so very nearly knocked out another Premier League club.
The FA Cup is up to its old tricks.
1-0 became 2 and Leeds were on the ropes.
And Ojo's in! And the ball's in the net! And Shea Ojo has made it 2-0!
Leeds boss Jesse Marsh cut a sorry figure on the sidelines. Then the fight back.
Headed by Rodrigo! Didn't take him long to make a difference.
2-1, followed by great drama. Some desperate Cardiff defence and a clear handball even without VAR. Joel Bagan was sent off and a chance for Rodrigo to make it 2-2.
Rodrigo saved!
Jack Annick to the rescue for Cardiff. Leeds' hopes looked to be over. Until a dramatic equaliser 3 minutes into stoppage time. From 18-year-old sub Sonny Perkins, they live to fight another day. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
Finally, the team behind an attempt to launch the first ever satellite into space from British soil say they are green for go. The rocket is attached to a retrofitted 747 named Cosmic Girl, and she could take off as soon as tomorrow night, as Vincent McAviney reports.
An ordinary runway at a small regional airport. But from here in Cornwall on Monday, one small step might see a giant leap into a brand new industry for Britain. This repurposed Virgin Atlantic 747, rechristened Cosmic Girl, will take off from Cornwall Spaceport with a rocket attached under its wing.
Right now, everything is green. The rocket was armed yesterday, and we'll be loading fuel later today. So we're in full motion right now, gearing towards a launch tomorrow.
After an hour's flight over the Atlantic, the rocket, which is carrying 9 satellites, will release, ignite and soar high to deliver them into Earth's orbit. Virgin Orbit has already carried out horizontal launches in California, but if successful, this would be the first orbital satellite launch from Western Europe. Today, the team were feeling confident despite a few cultural Cornish differences.
Pasties versus hamburgers. A little different weather than Mojave. But otherwise, the team is turning the wrenches in the same way.
You'll be able to watch the whole mission online, but thousands of Cornish people are expected to witness history being made at the airfield.
It's something you don't see every day somewhere like Cornwall, and it's a bit of an underdog story as well, and I think people love an underdog story, especially in the UK.
Several other airports are hoping to become spaceports. It's thought this system could generate thousands of connected jobs and billions of pounds for the UK. Vincent McAviney, ITV News.
And that's it. I'm back with the late news after Harry, the interview at 10:40. Until then, good evening.
It's a cold and wet outlook, with some heavy downpours throughout the day. Heinz Big Soup sponsors ITV National Weather.
Hello there, very good evening to you. I hope you've had a lovely weekend, despite the wet and windy weather that we've all seen, certainly in the last few days. Little changes as we look ahead to tonight. We are expecting to see showers rattling in fairly frequently on fairly strong winds. So consequently, it's going to be a cooler night tonight than we've been used to recently. On to the start of a brand new week, and absolutely nothing changes. Again, it's going to be a mixture of sunny spells and heavy blustery showers, a fairly strong wind once again. Signs of a bit of respite towards the southern parts of the UK during the second half of the day. Southern and eastern parts in particular could just about get away with a bright and dry afternoon. Fingers crossed those showers are going to really be concentrating themselves across more northern and western parts. And we are expecting, again, temperatures to be on the cool side, but add on the effect of that strong winds, and they are going to be feeling much closer to freezing. So wrap up warm, and I'll see you again soon. That's it. Bye-bye.
Heinz Big Soup sponsors ITV National Weather.